You were 20 years old, reaching for your car door, when the world ended. Not with fire, not with a sound. Your fingers closed on the handle, and the handle wasn't there. The car wasn't there. The street, the buildings, the whole city, gone. One blink, and you stood ankle-deep in cold moss, staring up at trees older than any country, where a parking garage had been a half-second before. All around you, hundreds of strangers stood frozen in a forest that should not exist, still clutching bags that had vanished, still mid-step. Everyone kept their memories. Nobody kept their world. The earth had reset itself, wiped every building, every road, every machine the human race ever made, back to the day before us. And in that silence, it asked all of humanity the same impossible question. Now that you have a second chance at everything, will you do it any differently? The land had become whatever it was before people touched it. Cities buried back under desert, coastlines swallowed by open sea. You just happened to be standing over a place that used to be forest. That luck was the only reason you lived. And that first day, you watched the old world die in people's faces. A man in a torn, expensive suit, a politician you'd seen on a screen 1,000 times, tried to give orders, stay calm, form a line, listen to him. Nobody did. There was no podium, no camera, no country left to run. He was just a man yelling at trees. A famous face stood waiting to be helped, waiting for the world to remember who they were. The crowd looked right through them. Fame was a currency that no longer existed. And the man everyone used to laugh at, the one who'd spent his life warning this was coming, wasn't afraid. He was smiling. "I told you," he kept whispering. For one day, he was the only one who'd been right. Remember that face. Because being right is the thing that would destroy him. You did nothing brave. You sat against a tree, and you shook. And when the cold came in, the whole forest filled with the sound of millions of people realizing they had no idea how to make fire. Hunger rewrote everyone within days, because only one question was left. What can you actually do? The farmer, the quiet man nobody ever listened to, suddenly had 100 people hanging on his every word. He knew which plants fed you and which ones ended you. He ate first now. The doctor became the most protected person in the forest. No tools, no medicine, just the knowledge in her head, worth more than any vault had ever been. The soldiers found each other in a day. You watched them huddle together, organize, take the watch while others slept, the only ones who didn't seem afraid of the dark. And frightened people began drifting toward them. And the banker, the influencer, the lawyer, the people who used to run the world, stood at the back holding skills the new world had no use for. You could see the slow, terrible math happening behind their eyes. The math of their own worthlessness. But skill couldn't save everyone. Every hospital, every pharmacy, every pill on earth had vanished with the buildings. The diabetic who needed insulin, the people who lived on daily medicine. The sick, the old, the injured. The doctor knew exactly what was wrong with them and could do nothing. There was no cure left anywhere in the world. So that first week, you watched the unlucky simply not wake up, no drama, just gone. The reset hadn't chosen who survived. Your own body did that. Where did you fit? Nowhere. You were a 20-year-old who knew how to do nothing useful, but you were young and healthy. Suddenly, the only kind of luck that counted. So you carried wood, stayed close to people who knew more, and made yourself just useful enough to keep. In the new world, that was survival. A camp grew up where you'd landed. Real fire. Shelters. People who specialized. And for a few strange weeks, it was almost beautiful. Strangers becoming a village, no money, no borders, every single person needed. The clever ones, the scientists, the engineers, the ones the world called geniuses, became gods of the small things: fire, clean water, tools, tanned hide. And an old teacher began carving everything into bark and stone, words, medicine, what worked. So the next ones don't start from nothing. Knowledge, choosing to save itself. You found a craftsman who needed an extra pair of hands, and he taught you to shape wood. For the first time, you were worth something. Not a hero, just a kid who finally had a place. But the cracks were already showing. The ones who seized the best ground and made everyone trade for it. The strong man whose rules applied to everybody but him. And you said nothing because you wanted to keep your spot by the fire. Most people said nothing. That silence is always how it starts. And then the new world reminded humanity of something it had forgotten for 10,000 years. The cages had been man-made too. So when the world reset, every animal ever locked away was suddenly free, right where it stood. Lions, bears, wolves. Thousands of years of predators handed the planet back all at once. By the second month, the forest at night was no longer empty. You heard the screams first, you found what was left in the morning. Something took 3 people from the edge of the camp, something carried off a child. For 10,000 years, humans had sat untouchable at the top of the food chain. In a single blink, they were prey again. The first walls the camp built weren't to keep other people out, they were to keep the dark out. And the slow, the weak, the unlucky, The cold and the hunger and the animals took them one by one. Nobody said it aloud, but everyone understood the new rule. Nature was sorting humanity the way it sorts everything else. You survived that month for no noble reason. You were just fast enough, and you stayed near the fire. 1 year in, it had become a settlement. Huts, planted fields, the first forge. Children being born who would never know what a car or a phone even was. For a moment, it looked like hope. Like humanity might actually do it differently this time. The shape of the old world crept back so quietly almost nobody noticed. The farmers owned the food, so they had power. The doctors owned health, so they had power. The strong man from the campfire was a chief now. And the politicians, the talkers, slid neatly between the people and the guards. The talkers always find their way back to the top. And then, before the first harvest was even in, the war came. There was another camp past the river. They had a better valley, yours had more people. That was the whole reason. No grand evil, no ideology, just they have, and we want, the same arithmetic that started every war in the old world. You watched the guards sharpen stakes into spears. You watched your chief give a speech about defending what's ours. In one gray morning they marched out, and the ones who came back had done the very thing humanity was supposed to have left in the rubble. They had ended each other. Again. 1 year. That was all the peace the human race could manage. Not one generation, not even one harvest. The cleanest slate a species has ever been handed, and within 12 months there was blood in the new grass. And the man who had to know? While everyone else picked a side, he couldn't. That one question, why did it happen, who did this, ate him alive. You'd see him at the tree line, scratching symbols into bark, muttering about patterns that were never there. He stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He'd grab people by the arm. Don't you want to know? By year's end, he was a ghost, still hunting an answer the universe would never give. He'd been the only one who saw it coming. And he was the one it broke. And you? You were a tradesman now. 21, good with your hands. You'd shaped the wood for those spear hafts without ever really thinking about it. And that was the point. You weren't evil, you just did your job and looked away. Almost everybody did. That's all it has ever taken, 10 years. Walk through it, timber buildings 2 stories high, roads, a market with bells, a school where that old teacher's carvings had become real books, medicine, farming, metalworking. By every measure that matters, humanity hadn't just survived, it had climbed. And running underneath all of it, woven into everything, like it had never once left, was war. The camps were towns now. The chiefs were kings. The river was a border that had already changed hands 3 times. A whole generation had grown up never knowing a single year without a war drum. That was the real horror. Not that war came back, but that nobody flinched at it anymore. War had become weather, a thing you planned for, budgeted for, normal. The same species that couldn't cure a fever on day 1 could now forge steel, and most of that steel was made to put into other people. And you were the craftsman now. 30 years old, good at your trade, and your trade was metal. They didn't come to you for plows anymore. They came for blades. And you made them, the same way you'd shaped those spear hafts at 21. Not because you hated anyone, because it was the work, and the work fed you, and everyone agreed it was necessary. And one evening you stood in the red light of your own forge, turning a finished sword over in your scarred hands, one of thousands you had made, and watched a column of young soldiers march past. Boys. The exact age you had been the morning the world ended. And it landed on you all at once. Humanity had been handed a blank planet, a perfect, total second chance at everything. And it used that chance to rebuild the hospitals and the armies, the schools and the swords, and then to do it all again, faster, the second time. The world was never the cage, we were. The earth reset itself completely. The buildings, the borders, the kings, the wars, none of it survived that morning, and we built every piece of it back with our own hands. Maybe it was never the world that was broken. So here is the only question that ever mattered, the one the silence asked 10 years ago in a forest that shouldn't exist. If the earth gave you a second chance at everything tomorrow, would you really be any different? If this story stuck with you, do one small thing, subscribe and tap the bell so the next one finds you. Thanks for watching.